Hello everyone, and welcome to Biopedia. The impression I get is that a lot of people find the various types of cousin confusing, so that's what I thought we would explore as a clarification today. We'll also ask a very hypothetical question along these lines. Namely, if you take the perspective of humans having 3 billion letters of DNA in their genome, how distant a relation would you have to have before the two of you would statistically not have a single letter in common anymore? This obviously has some assumptions, however, it's more meant to put into perspective how large the human genome really is. First off, what is the difference between the various forms of cousin? Let's start with first cousins. These are the children of two siblings. In other words, their grandparents are the last common ancestors that they share. From here, it's just a question of increasing the number of generations ago their last common ancestor was, by one generation every time. For example, second cousins are the children of first cousins, and their last common ancestors are their great-grandparents rather than their grandparents. Third cousins share great-great-grandparents and are the children of second cousins, and so on. So far, we have only considered cousins who are the same generation as each other. After all, first cousins are both grandchildren of common ancestors, etc. Let's now discuss when this isn't the case. For example, you might have a first cousin who has a child. In this case, your grandparents would be the great-grandparents of this new individual. This new person would therefore be your first cousin once removed. They're not the same generation as you, but one generation below. All well and good so far, but what if they have a child? Well, this new person would be your first cousin twice removed. After all, you're now 2 generations down from your first cousin. This keeps going down the generations and would work for any degree of cousin. This is how you end up with, for example, a fourth cousin 3 times removed. Let's use a hypothetical example at this point to make this a little bit clearer. This example will use the hypothetical Smith family, and we're going to assume that all father-to-son transitions use the same name in order to keep things distinguishable. Let's say that we start out with John Smith, who has 2 sons, John Smith Jr. and Albert Smith. These two are brothers. Their sons, let's say John III and Albert Jr., would be first cousins. John III and Albert III would be first cousins once removed, while John III and Albert IV are first cousins twice removed. Finally, John IV and Albert III are third cousins. I hope this example makes it a little bit clearer. Feel free to draw this tree out if it helps. The next concept to introduce is that of a double first cousin. This happens when, for example, 2 brothers marry 2 sisters. The children born from these 2 marriages would share their grandparents on both sides of their families, and would therefore be first cousins on both sides. Hence, this makes them double first cousins. Let's now get into today's hypothetical scenario. Let's say that every letter of DNA in your 3 billion letter genome is unique to you, and that exactly half of it is passed on to the next generation. How distant a relationship would you have to get to in terms of cousins until you no longer shared a single letter of your original genome? In essence, what I'm asking is, how long would you have to keep dividing until you reach less than 1 letter of DNA? The average percentage of DNA shared between parents and children, or full siblings, is 50%. However, 23andMe notes that this average percentage decreases to 47.5% between fathers and their sons. Anyway, first cousins, so the children of siblings, share only 12.5% of their DNA, while second cousins, the children of first cousins, share just 3.13%. What this translates to is that, for every generation that passes, the amount of DNA shared between cousins on the same level is 4 times lower than the previous level. Humans have a genome that is 3 billion letters. Therefore, siblings share 1.5 billion letters, again 50%. First cousins share 375 million, and second cousins share 93.75 million. You get the picture. We're just going to be dividing by 4 every generation. I won't go through the numbers of every single generation here, but you can do the maths yourself if you want to double check my working. The end result of all this division is that 15th cousins would share about 1.4 letters of their genetic code, while 16th cousins share about 0.35 letters. As you can't have a fraction of a letter of DNA, we're saying that, in this hypothetical example, 16th cousins would be the first relation who you don't share any of your original genome with. I should clarify that, again, we are imagining, for example, that every letter of your genetic code is painted yellow somehow, and that only 50% of your yellow genome is shared with your sibling, 12.5% with your first cousin, and so on. This all sounds well and good, but what does this mean? Well, 16th cousins would last have had a common ancestor in the form of their 15th great-grandparents. 15th great-grandparents are about 17 generations earlier. If we assume that a generation is about 30 years, this is about 510 years before the individuals in question were born. Let's put this into context using the example of the current King of the United Kingdom, Charles III. 17 generations before him is King Henry VII of England, who was born in 1457. All of this carries assumptions, as I've alluded to above, and this is more of a theoretical thought experiment rather than translating directly into the real world. However, I thought this little experiment would be a fun way to familiarise you with the different forms of cousinhood, as well as putting quite how large the human genome is into perspective. As always, thank you all for listening. Feel free to reach out at the show's email address for any questions, comments, or topic suggestions for future episodes. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.